Great. Good afternoon. Welcome to everyone who might be listening to this conversation live. And if you're not listening to it live, but at a later date, then hopefully you find, with all our conversations, you'll find it interesting, enjoyable. Joining us today, really excited. First of all, two of the young leaders that Let's Talk Leadership has been supporting over the last few months. We've got Tamara, who's joining us from India. So it's sort of late afternoon, early evening with her. We've got Rohit, who is in Birmingham in the UK. And so he's joining me from the UK. And we've got Marsha, who is actually on the east coast of the United States. So it's early morning for her. So we've got all time zones covered. And we're looking forward to this conversation. And just to say, if you've got any questions, if you want to join in the conversation, then just put your question to us and we'll do our best to answer it. But what we want to do today is just explore leadership through the eyes of two young leaders in different parts of the world, their own experiences, and two people, both of whom are being supported by, in Tamara's case, Phil Donaldson, one of our coaches based in the UK, and Rohit is being supported by Marsha. So we just want to explore how things are going, have a chat, have a conversation, and if you've got anything you want to ask us, then please join in. And we'll see where it goes from there. So anyway, Rohit, Tamara, Marsha, lovely to see you all. And interestingly, both you, Rohit and Tamara, have started sort of new roles recently. So would you just like to share a little bit about what you're currently doing so that people listening to this sort of get a feel for where you're at and what you're involved in at the moment? So Tamara, maybe over to you first of all.
Sure. Hi, lovely to be here. So I recently started working with Tata Trust, which is the philanthropic arm of the Tata Group. My specific role is to work with partnerships. So it is channeling funding towards our various initiatives that are aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. And that funding could be through corporate social responsibility, primarily with corporates based in India and elsewhere, but also through funding from foreign foundations and grants. So the idea is that while the group already has its own endeavors that it has set out to do, we could do it at, I'd say, larger scale through these additional partnerships. So it's been relatively recent. It's been about a month and a half since I started working with the trust. But before that, I worked in a very similar role with the Mahindra Foundation on a project that catered to educating marginalized girls across India, 9 states in the country. So it's been a bit of a shift in terms of the focus areas have moved from education now to health and water and sanitation and hygiene, not to mention cancer care and health. So it really runs the gamut. It's been very interesting, but certainly a steep learning curve so far.
Great. And so what specifically are you involved in at the moment? You've been taken on by the Tata Foundation. So is there a particular group within those that you've mentioned that you're supporting or helping?
No, so we actually look at basically the gamut of our interventions. I sort of am the Spock for them for the education initiatives because I've worked on education in the past, but I will dabble, amongst the others as well. So nutrition and livelihoods, we have very large interventions in these two areas. So it's been very interesting, I think, to immerse myself in the literature, understanding the background and the status of nutrition in the country specifically. Our indicators, social, economic, are on the lower end, some of the lowest in the world. So I would say that these initiatives really are the need of the hour. And it sort of helps like level that playing field for people that are extremely marginalized.
And Tamara, whereabouts in India are you based?
I'm based in Mumbai, but our initiatives are across the country. So I've actually recently come back from one of our project locations from another state, sort of looking at the water, sanitation, and menstrual hygiene initiatives that we've recently rolled out. So phenomenal work interacting with local women and adolescent girls, understanding how behavioral change has honestly impacted them, and there's been that shift in attitudes, mindsets, behaviors. So while we are based in Mumbai, we do have the opportunity to travel. India is very diverse. So each state is characterized by its own sort of cultural and other aspects. So it's very interesting to see how it plays out on the ground. While the model may remain the same, it obviously needs to be catered to sort of take those other factors into consideration.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating, but I'm always blown away whenever I talk to you or the other sort of colleagues that we work with in India, that just the scale and the numbers and the huge enormity of it all is just, mind blowing. But good on you. So Rohit, and you've also recently changed your role, or what you're doing. So tell us a little bit about what you're up to at the moment.
Yeah, I've started working for a company called So Far Sounds. I'd kind of previously done a bit of work with them on as a freelance basis, but now I'm kind of part of their team. My new role is the city lead for Birmingham, where I'm based. So Far Sounds is it's a company that we specialize in putting on secret concerts. So we'll take loads of unorthodox spaces and create these really special, intimate audience experiences that are like, you have a room full of people completely engrossed in these artists. So the idea is that the audience come with an open mind and are presented with 3 brand new artists in a space they wouldn't have expected. And kind of it was founded by trying to get back to that magic of concerts where it's a connection between artist and audience, and you kind of have that deep, meaningful connection, and like bringing that back, whereas sometimes when you're in a loud venue with a bar, there's lots of noise, distractions. But this is about kind of fostering that like pure connection and getting back to that heart of music, which I think most people have that connection to and have that kind of nostalgic response to. So yeah, my role will be kind of managing the Birmingham team and kind of putting on all of the gigs going forward and so we're hoping to scale it up. At the moment we've got about 4 on the team. We'll kind of build it up, but we book artists from across the country, and so yeah, it's about building that, and alongside running the gigs as well, we're going to try and kind of involve the Birmingham community a bit more with kind of monthly partnership events where we kind of work with organizations or community groups to kind of build the connectivity in Birmingham. One of the things with Birmingham, I'm not sure if you guys will know this, but it's colloquially known as the second city, but a lot of the music industry things in the UK is London based, and a little bit is in Manchester now as well, with the BBC going up there. But Birmingham is this kind of massive landmass that covers a really big part of the UK and has lots of different kind of small boroughs and cities and scenes, but it's not quite connected up, and that's kind of been a bit of a problem for the city. So I'm hoping with this we can really involve lots of different people and kind of connect up the dots and even expand out beyond just Birmingham to like the surrounding towns like Wolverhampton and Coventry and that sort of thing.
Because before you had this role, you were reaching out to communities in those sort of places, weren't you, with some of the art networking you were doing and the pop-ups and stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I guess with previously I was working at a venue called Symphony Hall and doing some freelance projects as well. And with the previous role, a lot of it was, again, working with younger artists from different areas and bringing them into the space and helping them develop their ideas and kind of build on projects that they had. So yeah, and there's a night in Birmingham called Neighborhood, which I kind of do a bit of work with as well, which is kind of on a small scale the ideal of what I think a kind of community event should be, in that it was founded by a guy who just went out and met lots of people and said, we're trying to create this kind of inclusive space, this jam night for people to come and play and express themselves. And sort of they had their 5th birthday in November, and it's a room full of people from different scenes across Birmingham, like gospel musicians from North Birmingham, rappers, conservatoire jazz musicians, vocalists from all over the place. So that's kind of, we want to try and emulate that on a bigger scale, I think, and just make it kind of that exciting place to be.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and we should explain. And you said a little bit about it. Birmingham is what, about 2.5 million people, something.
Yeah, I think so.
But it's got this enormous hinterland around it of other cities, and it's made up of an enormous range of people from different backgrounds, different walks of life. Traditionally, I think engineering, heavy industry, and gradually it's moved into one of the centres of the automotive industry that was no longer, unfortunately. But it's a very lively place, and it's going to be hosting the Commonwealth Games, I think, too, isn't it?
Yeah, next year, 2022.
Yeah. So there's quite a lot going on. So Marsha, you're one of our wonderful friends who help with all the coaching at Let's Talk Leadership. So how are things with you at the moment?
Great. We are grappling with some of the same challenges as other folks around the world, and that, of course, is with COVID. And as soon as you think that you've made, strides, you go 2 feet or 3 feet ahead, then you get knocked back. And so that's probably one of the major challenges that I, along with millions of other people, are facing. However, that said, I am just really having a wonderful, wonderful time doing coaching, and especially with emerging leaders like Rohit. And I have to say, be still my heart, because as I was listening to both him and Tamara, I was thinking, wow, both of them are pursuing passions of mine. One is music, and the other is female empowerment. So thank you to both of you, because I'm sure that you're providing such enrichment to the lives of others. So that's sad. And given that both of you have recently transitioned, from a leader's perspective, what would you say has been the most significant challenge during that, transitioning from one organization into another, especially as a leader?
There's a great question. So,
I don't mind. Yeah, I can jump in first. I think for me, I think this is something we've talked about that's been really useful for me, is kind of setting out what are my ideals and values based on my self-identities and what I feel strongly about, and kind of using that as a measure to kind of evaluate the projects I do, the leadership structures that are around me, and kind of using that to sense check whether something feels right or not, and using that to inform my practice going forward, which has been a big thing we've been discussing. So kind of things of looking forward, how am I going to be a leader to the team that I'm going to have? And I think a healthy way of doing that is kind of having a two-way dialogue at all times. Like the people that I'm managing, I should be working for them as much as they should be working for me, in terms of finding out what their interests are, what they want to get out of the role, and how we can help them progress. And I think that is a real challenge and a focus that should always be there. And in a world where you're kind of doing a lot of events and lots of things are happening all the time, that is often the thing that gets lost quite early on in that process. But that, I think, is at the core of what a good leadership structure is that kind of two-way dialogue and collaborative working, I think.
Yeah. Tamara, how about you?
I think for me, one of the biggest challenges was making this transition during COVID, and having to do all of it virtually to begin with, at least. Even the interview process, or even meeting with my team originally, it was all done virtually. And then I realized that maybe that hesitation or that lack of what in-person communication and interaction would give you was not only something I would feel, but it's a relatively new team. So we're all sort of in the same boat. And I think learning what worked for me and then extending it to other team members is something that I found to be very useful, and a big takeaway from one of my sessions with Phil. So he said, remember, it's not just you, they're also going to be feeling it. So if you found a way to foster that connection, then you extend it to them. And so you sort of, till you are able to meet in person, you've found a way to at least establish a connection with one another. And that has actually worked till we were able to meet in person.
Sounds like we might have lost the connection for a moment. Yeah, it's really.
Sorry.
Yeah, don't worry, you're back again.
Okay, my apologies. Don't have the best internet here, but yes, I was just saying that through my conversations with Phil, I realized that a lot of people are in the same boat, and kind of recognizing that and extending to them what has worked for you, I think puts you on better footing with one another. And that definitely made a difference for when we did meet in person, and set the foundation for what was to come.
You see, what listening to both of you, what to me is fascinating is that Marsha and I will often work with people who are further on in their careers, maybe in senior leadership roles. And I can remember conversations I've had over the last 12 months with quite large sort of global corporations who've said exactly what you've both just said. That, there was one person I remember talking to who'd joined at a senior level into an organization, but he'd never met his senior colleagues because they were all in lockdown. He'd recruited 2 people to join his team who he'd never met because they were in lockdown. and having to find ways of making them feel included and involved in if you like, the journey that they were all embarking on, because it was a new team, he said was hugely challenging for him. And one forgets that actually you faced exactly the same challenges that Rohit, you're developing, you've got a team that you're building around you. Tamara, you've moved into a new team that you're connected with, and you've had to manage it in a backdrop of very unusual circumstances. And by the sounds of things, you're doing it remarkably well.
I'd say, well, I'm kind of in the early process, so the proof will be in 3 months whether it's all fallen apart or not. But I think we're okay at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we talk about leadership as being a social process. There's management, which is about managing things, projects, time frames, budgets, things like that. But leadership is really about, helping people understand the direction you want them to go in, what you want to achieve. It's about helping them to sort of feel that what they're doing is part of what you're doing, and it's all aligned. And then there's the sort of commitment piece, which is really important, which is the one you've been talking about. Communicating with people, helping them to understand what needs to be done, listening to them, all of that stuff. And it's jolly difficult, when you're in a new role, and secondly, when a lot of the time you're having to do it virtually. I mean, Rohit, presumably we're working from home again here in the UK as of today, whereas Tamara is back in the office. Marsha, I don't know what the situation's like in the States at the moment, but
it's all over the place. We have folks who are, I think the big conversation right now is around hybrid.
Yeah.
The hybrid organization, and the two of you are, in a way, you're so very, very fortunate, and in a way, you're also facing a challenge that we have not really faced before since the so-called Industrial Revolution, and that's the change in the nature of work itself. I think that we were already changing in terms of the nature of work, and the pandemic just kind of accelerated that in terms of how people want to connect, what is important to people, and looking at work as something that they're going to get something out of. It's more than a job, but it's what is it that I can derive a certain amount of joy from. And so that's at least what I have begun to sense. And this doesn't matter, how high my clients are, is that they are beginning to really appreciate that we may be on the cusp of a real change in just how we do work. And I think that you all and as emerging leaders and the generation that you're in have so much more agility as part of the way that you're able to move in and out of the workplace. And so have you thought about, or have you actually engaged in, or my big word right now is, have you experimented with some different strategies for connecting? Because this is probably the future that we're going to be moving into, and that is, being able to connect despite of the platform.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting times. I mean, one of the things that I've been doing recently is reaching out to people that I don't know, but we have a common link in that we all studied at the same college in London. And given the nature of the college that I was at, the School of Oriental and African Studies, the students, or the ex-students, are spread all over the world. Interestingly, a lot of them are in the sort of work that you're doing, Tamara. They'll be in some form of development work, whether it be agriculture, finance, economic, or whatever. And you've just pressed the button and say alumni SOAS, and ping, the world explodes on your screen with people saying, oh yeah, we'd love to have a chat, and how are you getting on, and what were you doing? And my career started when you wrote letters, that you literally, there were no computers, there were no mobile phones. If you made contact with people, it was very rare, and they were normally people you met through work or local people to you. I was fortunate that I traveled a lot, but now it's the engagement is instant, the opportunities are instant, but that also leads to some challenges about how you manage it all and cope with it, and some of the pressures that it brings with it. So Tamara, with this new role you've got, setting aside the excitement of it all, what deep down, as far as your experience living and working in India is concerned, what are some of the challenges that maybe a young woman like you face that maybe an old man like me wouldn't face? What are some of the things?
I certainly wouldn't call you an old man at all, Matthew.
That's a loaded question, Matthew.
But it's an interesting question because it came up in my several conversations with Phil, and we found an interesting way to navigate it. So somebody on the relatively younger side comes into one of these age-old institutions. They've been around a long time. They're pioneers in their respective fields. They're doing incredible work. But I think that introduction of new blood means new ideas and new ways of doing things, which is so essential, right? That's what keeps things moving forward. But what I did learn with Phil and through our mentoring sessions was that coming in a rather more forceful, all-out manner to say, this is what we could do differently, this is what could be enhanced, can sometimes be a little too much, depending on who you're talking to on the other side of the table. We are creatures of habits. So sometimes we kind of want to stick with doing things the way we've been doing it for a long time. Breaking that mold can be quite difficult. And the introduction of maybe say new philosophies or new ways of executing things can be different. So what we did also understand, it's about moderation, and it's about letting it be more evidence-based. So you introduce something that I think is more palatable, where it's not too much of a shock system. And then if that works well, you use that as your benchmark to say, this worked really well. Now we could maybe push the envelope a little more and do something else differently. So I really learned that through my previous role, and then sort of bringing in that same knowledge and understanding to the present one. And I think it's going well so far.
Good, because I have to admit, in all my dealings I've had with both working in India briefly, but also with yourselves and with some of your friends and colleagues at Mahindra and at Nandi Foundation, there's a tremendous deference to more senior people. Everything is very, very polite and very formal, in a pleasant way. Don't get me wrong, I'm not being critical of it, but it's so unusual compared to the sort of slightly rougher, anything goes sort of Northern European approach. And it's how that, to me, perhaps how like a young person coming in with lots of new ideas, being charged with sort of moving things along a bit, navigates this very polite, very formal, sort of rather more structured way of behaving and working. I don't know.
Very true. It's very hierarchical, particularly the Indian institutions, right, which are predominantly, in some cases, also family-owned businesses that have been around. They are literally the pillars in some ways of the Indian economy. So it is a rather set way of working. You honestly hit the nail on the head, because it's an extremely formal, very hierarchy-based approach within an organization. So somebody who sort of, I came around about 4 or 5 years ago to work with one of the foundations. And it does take a while, I think, to also muster up the courage to speak out, and especially if you believe in your ideas, but then to sometimes have pushback can be a little worrying. So that's where we learned the moderation-based approach, where yes, you can introduce new ideas, but you sort of do it in a more moderated fashion. Then when it works, you use that as your way to say, now we could do something else differently because this one turned out so well. Yeah. So it's certainly it is definitely, I think, the way a lot of Indian institutions are characterized by their way of working. And I had the opportunity to work in the UK, and so it was so refreshing, because I think there's more scope for younger people to sort of pull up a chair, you're allowed to sit at the table, and you're given equal weight with your ideas and your opinions. But I think to foster that here is probably the role of people like me to, as we get further on along in our careers, to allow that conversation and dialogue with younger colleagues and ensure that environments are created that are conducive to that.
Yeah. So Rohit, Tamara makes it all sound a bit rosy, but you and I know that it isn't. So from your experience, how do you see it? Because you've moved from being based at symphony halls, which for people who don't know it is the most magnificent centre for musical performance in the United Kingdom, probably one of the best symphony halls in Europe. And you've moved now into sort of something that's very different, or sounds very different. So how do you see it?
I think I broadly agree. I would say that I, from experience of the industry sector as a whole, not just specifically Symphony Hall, but I think that, and there's been a lot of discourse around this, especially over the last 18 months, of a lot of the institutions, they are not as far away from that kind of hierarchical system as first thought. I think that you're right that often young people can be put and brought up to the table to have these discussions. However, I don't think that the systems are usually always catered to support those people as they do that. So often there's a case of people are brought in, they give an idea. If that doesn't work, then well, we've done that now, that's done. Or kind of, we've tried this before, it didn't work, so we're probably not going to do it again. And I think that institutions in general need to look at how they support young emerging people in their businesses, especially people of color, I would say, in terms of having a support network around them so that they feel empowered to give their opinions and are able to express themselves fully without fear of kind of getting it wrong, essentially. Because, I mean, mistakes are going to happen, the wrong decision is going to happen, but you need to find a way to enable that but still kind of take learnings and grow from that and push forward with things. So I do think that we're on the way in the UK where there's a lot of discourse around that sort of thing, but I don't think it's as it's perfect here. Far from it, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree. And Marcia, you and I know that we have endless conversations with organizations about encouraging people to make mistakes, allowing that learning to happen.
Yeah, I think that both Tamara and Rohit have hit onto something that has become quite a regular conversation, at least in the circles that I hang out in. And one of the notions that I have become intensely interested in and have begun to study is that of psychological safety. And what does it really mean to provide a psychologically safe environment for folks to do exactly what Rohit and Tamara are talking about? And there's a lot of emphasis put on diversity. However, diversity is just the first step. You really and truly have to be able to, as a manager, as a leader, you have to be able to leverage that diversity. Otherwise, you risk your talent exiting the organization. And I think that that's where a lot of your organizations are really right now going astray. They have put a lot of emphasis on diversity. So it's not like they don't have the different players around the table. However, they really have not learned how to create a safe environment for those same players to really be able to not just learn, we call it learner safety. In other words, to learn what it is that they need to learn, but to challenge the safety, to challenge the status quo. Because that's really where the innovative thinking occurs. So I like to say that diversity is offering me an invitation to the dance. Inclusion is asking me to dance once, I've gotten there to the party. And, the psychological safety is where you literally let me do my own dance. You have brought me in and you have said, Marcia, I like the way that you show up. The reason I brought you in is because you're different, and I'm going to let you be different because I know that that's why that's how we're going to become more successful. And I think that Rohit and I have had some really wonderful conversations around that, around identity, and recognizing that first of all, we have more than one identity, but also how our beliefs and our values and our experiences are all wrapped up into those identities. And when you diminish, or you expect me to diminish one of my identities, then I'm not able to show up as an authentic leader.
Yeah. And I had a conversation this morning with a client, and it's something that we're going to be working on next year. And they're Norwegian based, although they're a global business. And they've put together, on the end of diversity inclusion, they've added the word belonging. And it's when I first heard it, I thought, well, yeah, it's another global company coming up with 3 words that sort of, somehow sound a bit interesting and different. But the more we've been talking about it, the more it's been interesting how much emphasis is actually placed on the belonging bit. How do you create an environment in which people genuinely feel they belong? So, someone on another conversation said, I don't know why we talk about diversity, because every diversity is with us. It is a given. It is here. It's what you actually do to help people feel that they are of value, that their views and ideas and differences are really important. And I just like the word belonging that this particular company has added to diversity and inclusion, because that really is quite powerful. But I mean, Tamara, what do you feel? I mean, is it similar issues in India?
I'd say we're definitely on the path to maybe better times ahead, but that's also because a lot of young people believe in not conforming anymore and sort of breaking that mold. But I like what you said about the belonging element, because here, at least, my current organization, where India to begin with is a really large country, and so we're diverse in ourselves, right? We've got people from different states and characterized with its different languages, its different cultures. But I would say these environments need to celebrate those differences, as opposed to making us all sort of conform to one way of being or one way of seeing. And it is in those differences that your strength lies, because it's different perspectives, it's different schools of thought. And I would say it's that diversity of all of these different elements that will shape your organization to be better than it ever has been before. So while we do have a long way to go, people even here are sort of waking up and are cognizant of the fact that it is your right as an individual, as an employer, to sort of show up and be allowed to be the person that you are without having any other sort of restrictions or anything else imposed.
Yeah, interesting. And Rohit, that's more your experience here in the UK now, is it? Or do you think we've still got a long way to go?
I think we do still have a long way to go before as I say, it's just I think old institutions generally struggle with that, because that's not people haven't been included, haven't felt belonging for a long time, and so institutions that aren't diverse, that don't have a wide pool of people, need to understand where their gaps are and be able to kind of almost hold their hands up and say, we don't actually know, we've done this wrong, and kind of take responsibility for that. I think responsibility is a big part of this, in that people need to be not afraid to take responsibility, to apologize and kind of say, how do we do better, and actually take steps to do that. I think that's a really important thing. Just one thing I wanted to ask you, Tamara, is I guess that individuality that you're saying is coming from young people in India is really interesting, and celebrating that difference. I guess, I mean, I'm not an expert, but the political situation in India doesn't seem to be going that way.
Skewed. Yes.
So
yes.
how is that?
So skewed in a sense, certainly. But what I have really come to appreciate with young people being educated on, what their respective rights are, is how we're using that voice. We've had it all along, but now I think we're really coming into our own, where we've got the mediums and the platforms to use it, and it's being done constructively. I wouldn't say not all of it naturally, but for the most part, social media has actually been a game changer for people, young people like me in India, and sort of harnessing that to put forward this movement of sorts where we'd stand up for one another. I may not be part of a sect that is maybe impacted directly, but I think that sense of identifying and understanding that that's a fellow countryman, or that's one of my own, irrespective of our backgrounds, which could be very different, because India, like I said, is diverse as a country. We're such a large nation. So I think using that voice, which I've seen in the recent past, and really pushing forth for a nation that is equal in all elements and in all respects, it makes me really proud to be part of a time and a generation that is not so afraid anymore.
Yeah, that's really cool.
This might sound slightly controversial, so I'm going to tread on some dangerous ground. But often we have these conversations, and they're against the backdrop of different communities, different educations, different backgrounds, different skin color, different experiences. But underneath all of that, each of us, the four of us on this call today, are all individuals, regardless of our background. And I know that if I'm working with a team of people, there's invariably someone in that team that I find really annoying, I disagree with, or I find the habits they have, and just get to me. I try and blank it off, but I tend to think, oh no, and it can be as simple as something I'm helping involved in is organizing a team of people to do something that's nothing to do with work. And you still, even within a group of elderly white British people, there is a diversity of viewpoint that on occasions drives you to the brink of wanting to commit some heinous crime. And so, underneath all of the bigger macro, there is the individual relationship issues. So, Rohit, you're going to have 3 or 4 people working with you. That however hard you try, there's going to be someone there that's going to annoy the hell out of you, and you'll probably annoy them. So it's learning how to deal with that, because they've still got something to contribute. They've still got good ideas. They have a view on life which is different to yours. They can contribute. How are you going to cope with that?
I think for me, it's more about building the framework. Like the interpersonal thing is what it is, but it's about building a framework that everyone feels that they can have ownership of and contribute to. So that you're not, if you have arguments about personality, you're not kind of just arguing about that. What you're arguing about is the work that you're collaboratively doing together. If everyone is working towards the same goal, everyone wants the same outcomes. In my example, everyone wants a good show. As long as we all know we're working towards that and our intention is the same, then the disagreements are only healthy, because it's people who care about a thing, kind of trying to find the best way to do that. So I guess that is the way, just making sure that everyone is pulling in the same direction broadly and feels enabled to speak their mind. Because again, disagreements, doing things wrong, is actually a healthy thing. It helps you learn, helps you develop, helps you foster new ideas.
Great. And Tamara, how are you going to cope? Because there must be some people you work with and you think, why am I in the same room with this person? Or, why am I on this team? So what are the challenges there?
Well, I have to largely agree with Rohit. I think as long as you're sort of pulling in the same direction, you look at the ways you are aligned and maybe take the focus of the ways that you aren't. But I do think that not always seeing eye to eye can actually be a healthy thing as well. I think if we all sort of viewed the world through the same lens, then where is the fun in that? But yes, to have conversations in a healthy and respectful manner remains, of course, the tone. What I have also found to be useful is in moments like that, having those connections fostering a connection beyond work. So we did this in the recent past, where we sort of blocked Fridays off to get together and have conversations that were not to do about work. And this led us, it became very transactional during COVID. People were calling up one another for specific tasks that needed to be completed. That traditional water cooler conversation, or the coffee room chat, or the lunch table conversation, we didn't have avenues for that to connect over anymore. And so everything became very largely transactional, where the human element was, I think, getting lost in the midst of it. So Fridays were traditionally then just to bring a cup of coffee and have a chat. And I think it was in the course of those conversations that the difference in opinions that would sometimes surface, you kind of find the root of it. And so, you come in with a little more understanding, a little more empathy as to where this person and their respective view stems from. And that, I think, made it easier to navigate certain, maybe if we didn't see eye to eye, or certain misalignment.
And this may sound a little bit Freudian, but Matthew, when I have come up against certain personalities that just really kind of like rub me the wrong way, I have to step back, and I have to admit, it took me a long, long time to get to this point. But what I have to really admit is that maybe that person is reflecting my shadow back to me. In other words, it's the reason that this person is rubbing me the wrong way, and I really can't pinpoint it other than, blaming it on personality. Then it's my blind spot that I'm seeing in that other person. And oftentimes that is a way for me to learn more about me. Because oftentimes what we don't like in other people is probably one aspect of ourselves that we don't like. And it's easier for us to project that onto other folks. And so that's the reason why I say this sounds a bit Freudian. However, going back to tomorrow's point, what I have also been just, and it never fails to amaze me, is sitting down and getting to know that person and really engaging in an authentic conversation. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, wow, I really like this person. And this has happened more times than I care to really count. And so I have begun to recognize that, yes, like Tamara and Rohit said, that you're going to have conflict. And oftentimes that conflict is going to be expressed differently, just even depending upon your personality, how you were raised, what part of the country, the world you come from. But if you look at that conflict and really treat it as kind of a creative tension, then you can, again, move that to a higher level so that it contributes to innovative thinking.
I think you're muted, Matthew.
I've got a dog in the background trying to bite its way through the door. I'm conscious of, bless her, she's gorgeous, but she does get in the way. Like probably some of the people I work with, or they think I'm like that as well. But I'm conscious of time, and I've really enjoyed the chat we've been having for the last sort of 40 minutes or so. Could I just end with a question to both Rohit and Tamara? And this is not about your immediate experience of coaching, but given that Marsha has been working with you, Rohit, Phil's been working with you, Tamara, how has it helped? What do you think, if you were talking to other young leaders, and I'm not talking now in the context of Let's Talk Leadership, but just in terms of having someone you can talk to and share views with, how has it helped both of you, through the last few months that you've been working together?
For me, it's been huge. Actually, this is something we kind of touched on in our last session, but I think it's really good to have that space and framework within which to explore your own ideas and that time to evaluate things. Like for me, we've done things about talking about leadership structures and identity, and just having space to kind of articulate those ideas and really flesh them out and think about why I was doing stuff. It really was a massive, massive help. And even through this job transitioning phase, one of the things we did was kind of take my values to develop a framework in which to judge what my my job status was and what I was looking for in employment, what I was looking for in a career, whether the jobs were fulfilling and aligned with my beliefs. I think that was a huge thing. I also think as as one of those support networks that we were talking about for young people coming into business or into any industry, having a coaching, or previously I had a kind of a professional mentor as well, that kind of idea of having someone that you can bounce ideas off or can give you a little bit of positive reinforcement to kind of give you that confidence to express yourself and really think about your idea is massively helpful. It's something that Marsha has done and really helped me with through my time on the program. It's been amazing. And I think that's really vital for young people in the business, to have that person to kind of be like, no, you actually, what you've done so far is amazing. Or yes, that feels strange that that's happened to you. You're right. You should kind of investigate why that is. And those sorts of things are, I think, really important and really invaluable in supporting and helping people grow through their respective industry, I think.
Yeah, no, I absolutely echo the sentiment and the thoughts. And I think for me, working with Phil during the last couple of months, which have been in particular very tumultuous in India and around the world with COVID. And I think having that clarity whilst all of this chaos was around us, navigating, again, the transition to new jobs, but the reason for the transition, all of that became very integral to the decision making process. So it brought in a deep amount of clarity for me with the choices that I was making professionally, but also the kind of individual and colleague and professional that I wanted to be, or at least aimed to become. And that sort of drew for me a blueprint of sorts during the course of our conversation. So there's just been so many key takeaways in the last few months that I've had with my coaching sessions with Phil that have been extremely valuable and instrumental, I think, in making me. It's been courage as well, because it's given me courage to sort of make certain decisions where I felt a little adrift during the pandemic, where there was no certainty with any of it. And then sort of having this anchor take you through the various stages of it. A sounding board to come back to, and like Rohit said, the safe space to have these conversations and really, I think, go within yourself and within your mind as to what you wanted to achieve, and what, not just for yourself, but the person that you wanted to become for the people you worked with as well. And that has been so insightful. So very, very grateful to the team and to you, to Marsha and Matthew and everybody for the opportunity to work with us. Sorry, I think you're on mute again.
I'm muted.
Oh, you've gone back on mute.
It's one that, it's funny. I say this to other people. You're not muted. You're unmuted or you're muted, and I'm doing it myself. It's amazing how you get a distraction and it throws everything out. But no, it's great to hear both of you say that. And the reason for asking you was not to sort of just be here like an advertising sort of session for what we're doing, but it's trying to encourage other young people to take on the opportunity that might be offered to them in terms of coaching, because that's really, really important, and you're demonstrating that. And there are people like Marsha, not many of them, but there are a few people like Marsha around the world, unique individuals who've got the talent of helping you, and so all we're trying to do is connect people together. So I'm just going to finish by first of all, wishing you well for what you're doing and good luck with it all. I don't know where you are in your conversations, Marsha, and Phil's not with us today, but where you are in sort of how much more there is to be done. But there is no limit to this, depending on how it works and for both you and also for the coaches. But just a big thank you for joining us today. Good luck with the future. Enjoy the Christmas, New Year, whatever the break is. I don't know when the Hindi New Year is or whatever, but whenever it comes, enjoy it. Marsha, thanks for joining us from the United States and getting up early to do it. It's great. The coffee seems to have kept you going, which is wonderful. And if you know of any young people, young leaders in similar situations who you think we could help, do please let us know, because we've now got about 30 volunteer coaches from all over the world, including South Africa, that we can connect people with. We're just starting to coach 2 young women in Brazil, Gabriella and Brenda, working on social projects in northern Brazil. So, we have the resources to do it. So if you've got colleagues or friends who think you could benefit from it, then just be in touch, because it's wonderful to hear what you're doing. Okay, so it's great. And thank you for joining us today. It's been super and lovely to see you all.
Happy holidays.
Yeah.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks
Cheers.
very much indeed. Take care.